Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie, and in this video I'll be discussing some of the biggest news from across the CX space with the help of not one, not two, not three, not even four, but five expert customer experience analysts. Yesterday I am joined by Dave Michaels, lead analyst at talkingpoints.com, Shelly Kramer, principal analyst and founding partner at Futurum Research, John Arnold, principal of J. Arnold and Associates, Liz Miller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, and Michael Fauscette, not only a judge at our upcoming CX Awards, but founder, CEO, and Chief Analyst at Arion Research. It's great for you all to join us today, and lots of really great topics to discuss. So I think I'm actually going to start this conversation by winding back a few weeks to AWS reInvent. Dave, I think I'll start with you on this one, kind of as I know you were there. So did you enjoy the event, and kind of what, from a CX perspective, kind of really caught your eye?
It's a ridiculous event. I have to say, that covers so much stuff going on there. Not only does it cover so many topics, but it covers the entire city of Las Vegas. I think you end up going between sessions covering the entire strip. The stuff that I cared about, of course, is the enterprise communication stuff, which is primarily around Amazon Connect, the contact center solution. They did a bunch of announcements. I don't even remember them because that's not important. What's important is that they always have announcements every month. That they just keep on dropping improvements and updates, and I think that was continuing there. To me, what was really coming together at AWS was this whole story where AWS Connect is getting stronger and better with these other AWS services, such as Chime SDK, such as what they call the EUC division, in-user computing. They have things like the virtual desktops and workspaces. And the story, these things come together. You put a remote agent on a Chromebook, on workspaces, you set up a IVR on the Chrome SDK, and it's really becoming a very powerful story.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw a few months ago they kind of brought Lex into that Connect model as well, and
Yep.
kind of how they're merging all these aspects.
The Lex that actually has revenue, not the consumer Lex. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, important differentiation. Now, I don't know if anybody else kind of saw the event. I know, as Dave said, I think it was like 70,000 attendees or something quite spectacular like that. I don't know if anybody else kind of has any thoughts on the event.
I think that for me, what one of the areas that I cover for Futurum as well is sustainability, and amongst the many announcements that came out of reInvent, I really love Amazon's ongoing commitment to sustainability. And one of the announcements that they announced, or that was a water pledge that was kicked off the event, and so Adam Selipsky announced the company's commitment to be water positive by 2030, which, as we know, is a pretty short time away. And then they also announced a $10 million commitment to water.org to support the launch of the Water and Climate Fund. So, water scarcity right here in the United States, it's a big problem. It's a big problem all over the world. And so, with Amazon's cloud data centers, with, all of the company's huge footprint in e-commerce and everything else, I always am looking for what are they doing next to, sort of take the lead and, make these kind of commitments. So I thought that I walked away thinking that was really an important part of the event. And they also made another commitment. Water sustainability, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, material reduction in IT equipment, sustainable buildings are all part of what they're doing. And then another part of what they were talking about at the event was making a commitment to DEI and helping level the playing field for people of color, and for, some of the data that came out of Georgetown that was used and highlighted at the event was Black students represent 4% and Latinx students represent 13% of engineering degrees. So when you have these fast growing fields, tech, cloud, AI, all that sort of thing, making a commitment to increase diversity, I thought was, I mean, the tech announcements are amazing. These announcements to me were equally as amazing.
The people ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I thought was really interesting was the focus across a lot of, let's say, the functional dynamics of AWS, right? So AWS in communications, as it's appealing to, in the contact center, AWS for advertising and marketing, right? All of it really focused around really the demand for data as solid infrastructure. So AWS's announcement around data clean rooms, I thought was really interesting because it applied to so many different areas of where, quite frankly, this experience economy that everyone loves talking that we're existing in oftentimes fails, right? Because our data and our systems really have a hard time connecting. We can take limited data and then we can port them to that one little thing over there. Does not equal an experience economy. It just equals faster stuff. So I think that this focus on the data clean room is really being that foundation. Now, I will say, if a data clean room talks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it might be a CDP, but that's a completely different episode, Charlie. I think that might be a completely different conversation, but I do think it was interesting. I will say, the part that I was like, if this is really going to be a huge part of the reInvent story, let's not put the AWS advertising and marketing leadership session as the very last session on the very last day.
Yeah.
Just a hint.
Yeah, I think I think there were so many really great points in there. I think all the stuff around data, I think that's, as you said, it might be a separate discussion, but I thought it was very interesting to see how AWS is moving forward, and that and its sustainability pledges, as Shelly, you mentioned there. But kind of just shifting lanes now a little bit. There's been a lot going on at RingCentral, another major CX company. They made layoffs at kind of perhaps about a month ago now, and then there's kind of rumors about them acquiring 8x8, and now 8x8 has a new CEO. It's been quite an interesting situation to follow. So I don't know, John, I'll probably bring you in on this one. Kind of what's been your perspectives about what's going on there?
Well, sure, and I think everyone would have thoughts on this too. And I did want to comment a bit more on AWS. So if I just want to jump back at AWS for a second, to Shelly's point about the water initiative, of course, being in Las Vegas of all places. Just wait. Next week they're going to announce they're going to get into the fusion business, and they're going to eliminate the need to have data centers near water sources, and they'll solve that problem immediately. I want to ask Dave, for the Connect stuff, do you get a sense yet if they are positioning this kind of as a do-it-yourself, service, or do you think that they have bigger ideas for like full-fledged to go right up against Genesis and NICE and all the majors?
It's actually both. They're actually doing both, and I'm wondering if Twilio is going to go make an acquisition of TalkDesk for the similar reasons, but every CCaaS provider is opening up more and more APIs. AWS is all about APIs, and they're building up a stronger application, and they're winning in larger enterprises, and so they've already won and publicly announced Delta Airlines. There were other airlines at the receptions that I went to. They're getting some pretty big companies in there, and so it's working.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's the biggest, strongest cloud providers win, and Twilio isn't that, but AWS is, and I think that they have so much more leverage over everybody else. So anytime they make moves, and I'm so glad you were there, Dave. I wish I could have gone too, because they can do what they want, and I think anytime they pick a market, they may throw 10 things at the wall and none of them stick, but if it sticks, everyone else is in trouble. So I just think we got to watch, especially, Charlie, in this CX space, because consolidation, like Dave said earlier before we went live, Chapter 11s are coming. This is a space that's so ripe for disruption, and it's really up for grabs. With cloud, anybody can get into any line of business, and the cloud economics, I think, win at the end of the day. So, coming back to Ring, obviously not a cloud player, but they've played the game, I think, probably better than anybody. And whether it's sustainable in 2023, we're going to have to see, right? Because the market wants profits. They're valuing that finally over growth. And Ring just has such a big lead over everybody else. You know, their strategy still is to outspend everybody. And at the end of the day, they might win. They still may never make money, but if they win and outlast everyone, there'll be fewer players left. And 8x8 looks to be like one of those, who, this could be their last year as an independent entity. They've been in this game longer than just about any of these guys, maybe for Vonage, who came into this space and pivoted into enterprise and all that stuff. But they've just never been able to capitalize on the cachet. And now, Vonage is no longer independent. There's just fewer and fewer players who are standalones. And it's going to be hard to see. As we know, they've made that pivot now to contact center as well. I think they've given up on the enterprise communication space. It's just too difficult to make money. So where they go, I don't know. I don't think they'd be a good candidate for Ring. I think they have a kind of scorched earth policy. They'll take everybody they can along the way with them, but they don't need to acquire these guys. I think 8x8 is just going to be a valuable asset for the customers, obviously, and also their patent portfolio is pretty good. They have so much intellectual property there. They'd be a good target for certainly a larger player who needs it. But that's a longer conversation. But I think we'd all agree that it's hard to see how 8x8 is going to continue as an independent play for much longer.
Yeah, I think there's many interesting points there, especially about the patents as well. I mean, for 8x8, it seems kind of very undervalued actually for everything that it has within its portfolio. I guess that's a common theme across the kind of market there. Michael, maybe I'll bring you in on this too. Have you kind of had any thoughts about this story?
Well, the one thing that jumped out to me, and I mean, this has been a rumor off and on for a while, right? That they're looking at 8x8, and frankly, they probably sit around now in the boardroom wondering why they didn't do it when they first started talking about it too, right? Because it would have been economically a very different conversation. But I also wonder, one of the more profitable things that RingCentral's done is this reselling of NICE, and I just wonder if that really isn't going to block that in the end, because that's been such a profitable relationship, and an acquisition of 8x8 would break that quite significantly. So for me, when I heard this again, I just sort of brushed it away and went, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point in terms of by acquiring 8x8, they may get their own CCaaS solution, but they already do have that relationship with NICE, and then NICE has a very good reputation as kind of the creme of the industry. And
I would really like to see 8x8 remain independent. I think they're an important company, and I'd like to see that. If anyone were to buy them, my first instinct was Zoom. It would not only make Zoom UCaaS bigger than Ring, but it would actually give them a ton of contact center technologies that they're trying to develop into their own CCaaS solution. Problem is, Zoom doesn't like to acquire real solutions. They like to acquire acqui-hires and tuck-ins. So more power to 8x8. Keep them independent.
Yeah, I got to amplify that, Dave. I'm totally with you, and I hate to say it, but I'd hate to see Avaya go too. I think the market needs these legacy, players who really know what they're doing. They just can't execute very well, and that at the end of the day, that's going to be their downfall. I hate to say it, but we're heading into, as I said, more consolidation, and that's really not healthy, because, again, the big cloud players, the more the big guys control everything, the harder it's going to be for the UJets, the Edifies, the Sharpens, the small upstart guys who are trying to keep the diversity of our ecosystem going. It's going to be really difficult for them to stay in the game, and I just hate to see it boil down. I mean, it's happened in UCaaS already. And what happens with UCaaS is going to happen with CCaaS. It's the same story. And, we just hate to think that there'll just be a handful of players left by the end of next year, but it's, very possible.
Yeah, I think an example you gave there is particularly interesting in terms of, UJet have partnered with Google now as well, so I guess that's another kind of big player entering the space. I think, lots of really great stuff then. But another story in the space that's really caught my eye is everything that's, I think it's caught everyone's eye, to be honest, is everything going on at Salesforce with the co-CEO leaving.
Nothing is going on at Salesforce. They're all leaving.
Yeah, it's quite a story. I don't know, Liz, I know you've covered this quite a lot, but I don't know kind of your immediate thoughts on it.
Yeah, listen, I think that, and I've said this since kind of the moment I heard the news was, I don't necessarily think that this is the panic-inducing palace intrigue story that we're all hoping for. I think that anything that happens around Mark Benioff, like let's be honest, Mark is such this big, huge personality that we kind of always want there to be palace intrigue around him. Like we want there to be a there that's just so salacious that we can be like, ha ha, Mark Benioff did it, right? And so it's like Harry and Meghan times Game of Thrones plus something else, right? Like it's this amazing like Real Housewives of Salesforce moment. And I think we all want it to be there, but it always ends up to be a little bit of a nothing burger, if I'm being honest, when we're looking for that kind of intrigue. I think that with Bret Taylor, what made this feel really big was also what we all saw on stage at Dreamforce, which was this kind of comfortable set-in of two radically different personalities that really seemed to work well together, kind of for the first time, right? Where it's like, I'm going to put bunny ears on myself. We expect this from Mark Benioff. What none of us expected was for Bret Taylor to happily prance around in the bunny ears too, right? Like there was this kind of settling in that relationship that everyone really liked. And so I think when you see that relationship that you like and now it's over, there's a little bit of that sharp like sting to the heart. But the reality is that Bret Taylor focused on bringing that engineering, bringing that platform story together. And when your job is to pull platform off and then Slackify everything, and then, oh, by the way, your side gig is to deal with Twitter, like you're exhausted. You deserve a year in a villa someplace amazing with everyone bringing you like all the pasta and wine. Like that's just what he has earned. The problem was it wasn't the only announcement that was happening, right? And everyone was like, the stock looks really ripe to go ahead and turn in my vesting. I want to go do something new. I'm going to turn in by the December 5th deadline. So by December 4th, everyone had filed their paperwork. We all knew who was going to leave the company January 31st. And it feels like an exodus when, quite frankly, I kind of tend to think that it's really smart personal decisions, because which one of us on this call would be like, no, I'm not going to take my $1 million in stock vesting? Not a single one of us. We'd all be out the door. We'd be like, see it like later, skater. So I think a lot of this had to do with timing. I think a lot of it had to do with personal desire to go. I think it's unfair to lump the Stuart Butterfield exit and the Bret Taylor exit in the same basket, because it's very clear. I know a lot of you guys were on that same call with the Salesforce Analyst Roundtable, where we got to hear Stuart's reason for leaving. And you know what? Turning 50, having a baby, and finally being able to invest your stock, not a bad reason to go. But I also think that what is also really important is that Salesforce is a massive corporation that engages in succession planning. So when they can plan for these departures, they do. Bret Taylor was very, very easily a very quick decision that was readily evident. But again, there is succession planning there. Granted, Bret Taylor was part of the big succession plan, or at least we all thought he was. So I think we're going to see a lot of that settle down over the next year. But they've got a deep bench. I don't worry about Salesforce. I kind of worry about Mark Benioff needing a hug in like a very empty Salesforce forest again. But I think he'll be fine. He'll go to Hawaii. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I think, as you said with Bret Taylor, I think he got caught up in all the Elon Musk arguments before he
exhausting,
took
right?
Twitter as well. So yeah, I can imagine it's not in.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's like every relationship that breaks up, it's complicated, right? I mean, if you ask either side, it's complicated. You know, you got all the swirling around Bret for the Twitter stuff that's happened this year. You know, all the people that almost all the executives that reported directly to Bret, and then frankly, co-CEOs is just a tough thing, right? Especially when you've got the Mark Benioff personality as one of the co's. I mean, come on. So I'm sure there was some friction, but I also know that everything I've ever heard about them is that they are friends, and I don't. You know, I think it's not an unreasonable thing to think an entrepreneur wants to go do something entrepreneurial again and get out of a big thing, especially after the year he had, right? Yeah, and frankly, he'll just get bought again and come back and be the co-CEO again. I mean, what?
Yeah, I think
I think it's important. You know, we are all in the change business, right? We live in the trenches of change, and so when you look at the co-CEO role. I've done that. It's really hard. And that doesn't mean that the person that you're sharing that role with is bad in any way. It's just really hard. And then when you look at, some of these brilliant people who've done so many exciting things, and I don't know off the top of my head how many years Brett was, in this particular role, but there's that entrepreneurial drive, there's that chomping to do something new, and there's so much opportunity, macroeconomic conditions aside, right? Tough econ doesn't matter. Like, there's so many great opportunities to do amazing things with well-established companies, with new companies. And I was meeting with the team at Tanium a couple of weeks ago in Austin for their annual event. They're really a player in the security market, and they have a new chief product officer who comes from stints at Google and Microsoft. And one of the things he said was, I've pretty much got a 4-year track record. Everything I do, I spend about 4 years on it. So here's the thing. I want to make stuff happen. I want to make it happen right now because I don't know what else I'm going to be interested in doing in 4 years. So I think when you look at all of this together, this isn't, as you said, some big, juicy, salacious story. And the Slack situation, Stewart's logic makes, I had babies in my middle 40s. I mean, it changes your perspective. And also, you've got a couple of his, his chief product officer, his senior vice president of brand and marketing also leaving. I mean, sometimes it's just time. It's time.
Yeah, we hey, it's our stock's coming in. But listen, Lidiane Jones is no slouch. I think in all of this, that's what ended up getting lost in the palace intrigue. Is that it wasn't like Stewart made the announcement Thursday and then someone looked around and was like, Lidiane, do it. No, this was planned since summer.
Yeah, I gotta take issue with this. I agree with what you guys are saying about these individually. You can understand these decisions, but you have to look at the bigger picture. This is a lot of decisions. This is the second co-CEO that didn't work. This is with Brett and Stewart, they were the masterminds of what they were going to accomplish. Those two guys are both gone. Now what is Salesforce going to do? The articles are saying that Benioff doesn't even care about Slack. It was a $27.7 billion acquisition that nobody really understood to begin with. But the pandemic happened and it kind of worked out and they got to work and they had some leverage. Pandemic's ending now. Now what are they going to do with this thing? I think that we're going to see a continued brain drain. I think we're going to see loss of momentum. I think that this is just too much to happen, and nobody's going to want to be the co-CEO of Salesforce after 2 strikes. And so I think that we're going to have a whole readjustment period. And the stock is down, so they've got to focus on the CRM core business. Forget Slack; that's a distraction. I think that you put all these dots together, you get a line that goes straight down, and I don't think it's good what at all. And I'm actually really sad by it because I really liked Slack, but I think it's over. It was great. It was great while it lasted.
If you look at the other side of the numbers, though, after the earnings, I did a little math, and this is, maybe this is terrible, but I don't know, 2019, fiscal year 2019, 13 billion, fiscal year 2023, 31 billion, 4 years, double. I don't know. That don't sound unhealthy to me.
Dave, isn't Slack going to be like what Skype was to Microsoft, an orphan they couldn't just make a home for, right?
Exactly. The numbers you're looking at are all in the mirror. They're all with the innovators there. They're all with the pandemic there. Of course, the numbers have been great. But now the momentum, the wind is out of the sails. Teams continues to grow like crazy, and I just don't understand how you and all the things that Mark is that keeps Mark up at night. All the things that keep him up at night. Where does Slack fit on that list? It's not.
I'm gonna push back on that one just a little bit here because I think that when you look at Slack, you can't look at Slack as Slack. You have to look at of what, quite frankly, Brett Taylor was charged to do in 2018, right? And how Slack then became integrated. So when you start to look at platform needs to be central because, quite frankly, CRM as a individual standalone tool is dying. if not already dead, right? We now need to reinvent and rethink where our data goes, where our teams go, where our collaboration goes, and how we integrate all of this. Because if we look at their past track record for integrations, they did not necessarily look at the engineering behind how those tools were built. They've had to rebuild ground up. When I say that Lidiane Jones is no slouch, it's because she had to look at Marketing Cloud and be like, wow, none of this fits together. Let's go make this whole a unified integrated system. So Slack and Genie, kind of the data layer and the collaboration and the operations layer, is what's going to pull all of this together. Because if you want to know the acquisition that didn't do it and didn't do what they thought it was going to do by integrating all of these tools, was MuleSoft. MuleSoft is the integrator to legacy. Slack and Genie, or their new data lakehouse, that's the bridge to future. And now you can have those two layers that sandwich together. So what Brett did, I mean, and Shelly is spot on, right? When you talk about what was Brett Taylor's entrepreneurial drive, it was to get that platform working as opposed to getting the individual tools working. He did it. Now he's going to go be entrepreneurial someplace else, because there's a difference between wanting to be an entrepreneur and wanting to be someplace that's entrepreneurial, right? And I think that from the Slack perspective, it doesn't have to be all about Slack. None of us want to talk about getting rickrolled by the Rick Astley emoji anymore. It's about how Slack is that operational center point, and it's now the equal in the platform to the lakehouse data layer that Genie represents. Einstein gets to go nuts across both of those, and then all of the other applications get right-sized, right? The cloud's right-sized on a really solid platform. Because what this is Salesforce looking at the hyperscalers being like, oh, you thought you guys were the only ones that could do this? For me, that's a really interesting shot across the bow, right? So the question for Salesforce is, okay, now that the engineering's done, you've made the sausage. Awesome. What is Mark Benioff's next big dream going to be? And do you have a team in place around him that can make sure that ship stays steady as he's running around the deck dreaming big dreams?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Liz, I think I completely agree, and I think the thing that people don't really think about a lot when they think of Slack is that it really turns into the UI for most of the enterprise into Salesforce. It's integrated across everything now, and then at the same time, we've got a strong need to move to real-time data, and with Genie in the platform and Slack on top of it, I think it's a really powerful combination of the platform. Now, there's other pieces that have got to come along, and certainly we're still, we're not there yet, but I think it's a start. It's a start, and nobody else has started in that direction right now that I can see.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point as well about bringing Genie involved with Salesforce's new solution. I think it's such a rich topic, everything that's going on at Salesforce at the moment, and so much great insights from you all there. I just quickly want to finish up, and I know, Shelly, you wanted to talk a little bit about everything that's been going on at Webex recently. I know you were at their event with NASA. Was it last week, maybe? I don't know if you could maybe share a few insights from that.
It was last week. Yeah, I'll just real quickly say, so I got the chance to go to the Johnson Space Center in Houston and participate in a tech demo that is a partnership between Lockheed Martin, Webex, and Amazon, and it's all about bringing voice and video collaboration capabilities to deep space. And so this, if any of you were paying attention to we had a space capsule land, and that was part of the Orion mission. This is the Artemis capsule. And so the Cisco technology and Amazon technology was on board during this mission. And so we got the chance, I was with Zeus, and we got the chance to do things like, ask Amazon, hey Alexa, what's the ambient temperature in the capsule? Or we got to experiment with, writing messages on a Cisco whiteboard and seeing them 5 seconds later displayed in the space capsule. And so when you think about the application, and by the way, I'll say I'm not a space geek. I wasn't a space geek going in. I emerged as certainly a space geek after that amazing experience. But when you think about, the applications for technology in very remote areas, like is there anything more remote than deep space that we know of? Probably not. But then when you think about, other applications, oil rigs and, all the sort of thing where Wi-Fi technology is not a given, and just the ability of these platforms to bring people together and to make efficiencies and things like that. It was just a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, I think I remember writing an article actually a few months ago, and I came across some research which suggested that I think US, like 7 or 11% of the US population don't have access to internet and things like that. And I think it was really eye-opening actually in terms of the accessibility to a lot of kind of CX technology for me.
Well, two things every space geek knows is that in a spacecraft they always have video communications and they always have voice control. Turns out that those are both false statements. That no spacecraft has voice control and no spacecraft has video conferencing, and that's why this Callisto project is so interesting. And it's not plug and play technology. I mean, Cisco had to dramatically customize the Webex technology, and Amazon had to put Lex on board. They don't do that. I mean, Lex is in Amazon Cloud, so they actually had to put it on board. I've never done that before. So a lot of really interesting things going on in that Callisto project.
Well, and actually one thing that, so the Webex system displayed in the capsule by way of an Apple iPad. And when the engineers were working on this, it's like, okay, how are we going to make this happen? And an iPad made perfect sense, but can it withstand withstand the pressures in space? So they were putting an iPad into, radiation machines to test what it could withstand, and it held up beautifully.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's probably a great place to end this. We've come full circle. We're starting with Amazon, and then we kind of brought in the Amazon at the end there. So I think, yeah, excellent. I would like to thank all of you for joining the conversation today. It's been really insightful across so many different subjects. So thank you for joining me, and also thank you to everybody for watching. Bye for now.